Good if you're good. All right, we are still in Matthew 16, but we're getting closer to the end of this chapter. And just the reason why we are spending the amount of time that we are in this chapter is it's one of those overly familiar. As we're going through our Matthew study, we're wanting to constantly have this refreshed in our mind, that we're not just wanting to go through this and read it, reread it as it's something that we're just, okay, I already know what's here. Because when we start getting into that mode, then our brain goes on autopilot, and it's just, okay, we're just reading this for the sake of reading it, but not actually studying it out. So there's a difference between reading and studying. You'll hear people brag all the time, well, I've read the Bible through however many times. That doesn't mean anything, especially if you're not studying it, piecing these things together, and making all the proper connections that you're needing to do. We finished last time with Matthew 16:18, and we discussed it further in our sermon time as well, where Jesus says to Peter, and I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. We wanted to make sure that we understood this verse in view of everything that's transpired. The Pharisees and Sadducees team up against him and try to tempt him. Jesus calls them out for being hypocrites. He departs from them. Now he's going to be with his apostles and disciples, and he's going to enlighten them even further on certain things that are going to transpire, and especially with what we have been discussed here about the church and how all of that's going to come into play. You had the discussion about beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, and we went through all of that. And we are in this section where we're looking now where we have a shift or a transition in terminology to where what has Jesus been talking about all the way through this material and what he's going to build and what he's going to establish. Hey, my friend.
Hello.
Good morning to you. Come on in. Have yourself a seat anywhere. Right, so Jesus coming. What's he going to build? What's he going to establish? All right, his kingdom. All of this time we have Jesus discussing the kingdom, the kingdom, the kingdom. Now we have this discussion about the church. And we know that verse 19 also is going to show us that the terminology is going to be the same. It's not a shift. We're not changing topics. The very thing he's started out his discussion with, the kingdom, his church, is one and the same. And that's going to be his people, his citizens that he is assembling together. We discussed last time how that many will look at this and say, well, this is talking about Peter being this rock upon which I'll build my church, and we dealt with that and how that doesn't fit with any of the other passages as to who the foundation of the church actually is. Matthew 21:42, Old Testament prophecy. Did you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner? This is the Lord's doing and is marvelous in our eyes. This stone is not talking about Peter. This is talking about Jesus. 1 Corinthians 3:11. Paul writes and says, for other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So in fact, our foundation is Christ, not Peter. That can also be proven further when we are looking at verse 19. I'm getting used to this new clicker. Verse 19 and 20, when Jesus takes it a step further and he says, and I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. Now, verse 19, we have this discussion of, I'll give unto you the keys, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. What is this describing? What's this talking about? What's it setting up for when the kingdom is going to be established?
Day of Pentecost.
All right, Day of Pentecost. But in particular, when we're thinking about the apostles and these keys that are being given.
The Holy Spirit?
Mm-mm. If somebody has keys to something, then what do they have?
Access.
Oh.
Way in.
Huh?
A way in.
All right, a way in, access.
Access to the kingdom.
All right.
The church.
So the very fact that you have All right, these keys, and they're being given to Peter in the context. We're going to take it a step further here in just a moment. What does that say about the authority of the apostles?
It's given the authority to them because he's going to be ascending into heaven, so he's preparing them to accept that responsibility.
Okay. When it comes to the time frame of setting up the kingdom and establishing the church, as Jamie just said, Jesus is going to ascend to heaven before the church is established. So somebody is going to have to be here, and they're going to have authority. That's all this is. This is just a simple statement of apostolic authority. Who is it that's going to usher this in? Who is it that's going to be in charge of binding and loosing? It's going to be the apostles. Now again, the Roman Catholics will try to look at this and say, well, that's to Peter alone that this statement is being made. But when we get over to Matthew 18, this same discussion is going to be had, and it's going to be said to the entire group. And then also when you get over to Matthew 19, Jesus is going to mention about the 12 thrones and how those 12 thrones are going to judge over the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is not, even though Peter is going to be a key player in this, he is not the chief apostle. He's not the head apostle. He's not the head of the church. It's just simply being said to Peter because he's the one that's stepping up and stepping forward, and he's making this great confession. And Jesus says to him, okay, yeah, you're going to be the one to do this, but then what happens to Peter as we get towards the middle of the book of Acts, specifically Acts 12?
Switches to Paul.
All right, Peter falls out of view, and now we start focusing in on what Paul is doing. For something, or for someone to be so intricate or so needful for what's being done, there's not a whole lot that he's involved in doing, or at least that we know about. And then even when we get over into the epistles, how many epistles did Peter write? There's only 2 that we have. And the rest of them are being written by Paul or some anonymous individuals as well. So when we're considering everything that's transpiring here, Jesus is establishing just how crucial and how important his church, his kingdom is going to be. So for the denominational world to say, well, yeah, the church doesn't matter, the church isn't significant, then why all of this discussion about what's going to happen and the authority that's going to be found inside of the church and the binding and the loosing that's going to be done? Now, just to further illustrate and show that the keys there being a symbol of authority or power that an individual has. Revelation 1:18, Jesus speaking of himself says, I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death. Person has keys, has authority. I can let you in or I can keep you out. John 20:23, we have it also being said about the apostles that the work that they're going to be involved in is, whosoever sins ye, the apostles, remit, they are remitted unto them, and whosoever sins ye retain, they are retained. Their authority, this group, speaking of the apostles, they're going to be able to do this. And how are they going to be doing this? By their own authority? No, not by their own authority. 2 Corinthians 5:20, we have Paul writing about himself and the apostles and how that they are ambassadors. An ambassador is sent to another country by the authority of somebody else. But when that ambassador shows up in that country, how are they to be treated?
And so that the main person of authority is there.
All right, so in our country we have a president. He sends an ambassador to another country. When that ambassador shows up, they treat him as if he were the president. He's got the same kind of control, got the same kind of power. And thus that's what's being represented inside the church with the apostles. It's not their own authority, not their own power, but it's power that's granted to them. So they have this authority because, in fact, it's been given by another. Now, this thing's being weird now. I don't like it. I just can't win. No. So my laptop's doing something kind of weird. All right. Now, when it comes to the binding and the loosing that the apostles are going to be doing, again, whatsoever they bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. That's where their authority is coming from. How is it that an apostle can bind something inside of the church? Because it's already been bound in heaven. God has already regulated it. How is it that an apostle will be able to loose anything in the church? Their authority is not theirs, it's granted to them, so it's got to come from somewhere else. It's coming from above, it's coming from heaven. You have the same thing being discussed, but contrasted. It's different in Matthew 23 and talking about the Pharisees. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit and Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. For they bind. Same word in Matthew 16. Here are the Pharisees, and they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. So this isn't anything that's beyond our comprehension or beyond our normal way of thinking on how things operate. When you're at work, you have a manager, and he's telling you certain things to do within the company. How is he able to tell you to do those certain things? Because it's come down the chain through corporate or whoever else or whoever it might be that's above them. Now the Pharisees, they bind without authority. They sit in Moses' seat, but nobody actually desired for them to be there. They placed themselves there. The apostles, on the other hand, were chosen specifically for this job. Here's what we have happening. Because of this confession, and because of the realization of who Jesus is and what it is that He has come to do, from that time forth began Jesus to show unto His disciples how that He must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. Now again, all of this discussion goes against so much of what you're going to hear other churches say. Other churches in this area will say, well, Jesus never intended to build His church. Jesus never intended to be killed on the cross. In fact, Andrew Sluter in North Carolina, he put out a video going so far as to say that there is no teaching of ever looking forward to the cross. Then what do you do with this? Jesus clearly has this in mind because He's telling it to His apostles. And then next week, when we study Matthew 17 and we study the Transfiguration on the Mount, we're also going to read Luke's account of that event. So just a heads up for next week for you to be studying ahead and read Matthew 17 and Luke 9, I think it is, of that same situation. And you can see from everything that's being told. All of this was part of the plan. Jesus knew this was coming. Look at what He's saying. He should suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed. But yet our denominational friends will say, yeah, Jesus was supposed to come establish His kingdom for the first time. They weren't supposed to reject Him, but they did. Well, then we had to put plan B into place. This is all plan A. He knew all of this is coming. Now, Peter has announced Jesus is not just the Messiah, but that He is in fact the Son of God. Jesus will now give extra light about His mission. How is it that the church is going to come about? How is it the kingdom is going to be established? How is it that men are going to be redeemed? This is part of it. The next step in the plan is the crucifixion. So with this in mind, it should be pretty obvious as to why Jesus is going to separate Himself from the Pharisees and Sadducees at this point in verse 4. We are getting into some heavy material. And what's the last thing you want going on when you are trying to get into the guts of what your plan is. Are you wanting any distractions? No. So we're leaving them alone and we're getting into the meat of this material. Jesus knows that this is coming and that it's not time for the Jews to murder him. Jesus tells his apostles he will die, but every time that Jesus mentions his death, he also mentions his resurrection. And that's an important point to consider and for us to remember. We learn from this how to deal with present distresses, how to deal with present problems. This is one way to face troubles of life, is to look beyond what the trouble is right now. What is in front of Jesus at this point is the cross. But Jesus was able to see past the cross. When we limit our sight, so just like we discussed with Peter walking on the water, that was his problem. He started limiting his view. When we start doing that and we start only viewing the present distress and the present trouble, we always make extra problems for ourselves in those times of trouble. And in those times of trouble, we won't be able to handle whatever the problems are. But even with that, with the mindset of, okay, being able to look beyond yourself in a time of trouble. When you get yourself into some trouble, what's kind of the common thought or common reaction? How soon do we want to get out of trouble?
Instantly.
All right, pretty fast, right? But when we're considering some of the trouble that we find ourselves in or certain problems that we get ourselves into, does everything need an immediate reaction?
Yes.
Everything doesn't. In fact, some situations would be better, all right, let's take a breath, calm down, and let's try to look past this. Let's try to see how this may play out. Let's try to view what's on the other side of it. And we're learning from this section. This is what the Bible helps us to do. It helps us to look beyond any problem that we find ourselves in. To even be able to look past the problem of death. What does the Bible tell us about death?
Not to fear it,
All right? Why not to fear it?
because you have a home waiting for you up in heaven.
Death is not the end. Death is just a transition. Death is just the doorway into a new realm of life. So what about when it comes to the grave and the power that it has? No longer has any power. It no longer has any hold. And so we have that being pictured with Jesus and his death. What does he see beyond that? In this context, verses 27, 28, there's glory beyond the cross. All right? So what about when we find ourselves going through a stormy time? What always comes after a storm? There's calm. Clouds break, sun shines through. Just got to be able to weather the storm. Chapter 16 to the crucifixion, that's what's happening. We're weathering the storm. So whatever we face, this is not the end. 1 Corinthians 10. There is a way of escape. Just got to be able to see it. Look past the current moment to see by faith something else that is there. So we get so overwhelmed by what we are enduring in the moment that we can actually end up involve ourselves in building it bigger than what it actually is. So then you have Matthew 16:22. What we've just discussed and what we're illustrating about not being able to look beyond. Peter falls right into that trap. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. What's Peter's problem?
He can't see the bigger picture.
He can't see the bigger picture. He cannot see at this time and at this moment beyond what the cross is. And here's the trouble for all of us, is being able to see correctly what the cross actually is signifying and what it has in store. Won't have anything on the screen for a little bit. Peter took and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. But he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan, thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Now we're able to view just how quickly our perspectives can change. With everything that Peter has seen Jesus to do, and even being present at Jesus' baptism, and hearing the voice from heaven, seeing the Holy Spirit descend as a dove, and that Jesus says in Matthew 16, in verse 17, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. That Peter makes that great confession based upon the revelation that God has given. Now, with everything that Jesus has done, and that's a confirming sign to Peter that, okay, you're the Son of God, then what should be Peter's mentality with what Jesus just said about going to Jerusalem, dying, but being raised from the dead?
You should believe his words.
Should be easy. Okay, that's not hard to believe. Jesus, I've seen you walk on water. If you can walk on water, why can't you be raised from the dead? But as we're saying, as we're going through this study, we're emphasizing the fact of every time that we get ourselves into a position of, okay, I've got this, what do we quickly learn about ourselves?
More.
Well, it's not just saying I want more. Just because I've got a handle on this, does that mean I've got a handle on everything?
No.
So once again, we're being shown with Peter, this is a continuous process that's needing to take place. Even with this individual that we just read about, that he's going to get the keys of the kingdom.
Which is encouraging.
Should be very encouraging. So it goes back to the point of not piecing everything together.
Not understanding.
Not remembering.
Exercising the mind.
Exactly. Exercising the mind, exercising your faith, building patience, experience. Peter, what has everything that you've seen, what should it be showing you? Death should not be a problem. But yet here comes Peter saying what he says, and then Jesus responds to him in the way that he does. And thus we have a very good warning for us today. Let me see if I can get this going again. As to who it is that's going to possibly come in and be a hindrance to what it is that we're trying to do. All right, let's see what this does. We are right here. Okay. In viewing properly the cross, we have Christ's death, giving His blood to redeem us. And oftentimes, that's how we limit our view of the cross. And we stop right there, but we must view it in broader terms. Because it's only the cross that remolds, remakes within us the Beatitudes. That if I have a problem with those attitudes and with those characteristics and having them in my life, I have not seen properly the cross. And the study of Matthew, along with the other gospel accounts, should give us a better understanding of what we're needing to see. So Jesus turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan, thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. So here we have, Satan has returned. Matthew 4, Satan tempts Christ directly. But does that stop Satan from doing what he's wanting to try to do?
He'll never stop.
Yeah. Here Satan shows up once again to try to tempt Christ and to stop his mission. So Satan is back, but this time he has a tool. He has an ally. Jesus says, Satan, thou art an offense to me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Speaking of Peter, Satan has returned, but using one of Jesus' friends, somebody within his inner circle. Now, Peter is not possessed here. Because if you have a person that's possessed, you can't blame them for what they're doing. They don't have any control, they don't have any power. So the very fact that Jesus is rebuking Peter directly is a showing that Peter's in full control of what he's doing. Now, I'm sure that Peter is well-intentioned. He's got Jesus in mind and at heart. This will never happen to you. We will not allow it to happen to you. We're going to try to protect you. He's looking out for Jesus. But yet Jesus responds the way that he does. To try and stop the work of God puts a person in Satan's camp. Jesus said, and we can find that application all around us today. Jesus says, I will die, I'll raise again. Peter says, be not so, Lord. Well, think about another thing that Jesus said. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. And we've got everybody in the community around, I shouldn't say everybody, most of the community around us, and what do they say about that? Oh, go back. One more. Be it far from thee, Lord. It's not so, Lord. What would Jesus say about those individuals?
Same thing. Get thee behind me.
Jesus would say to our religious friends, Get thee behind me, Satan. And why? What is it that's actually happening? Thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Peter, you're thinking physically again. You're not viewing this from the spiritual realm and what's needing to take place. Go ahead. So those that are closest to us can end up being an instrument of Satan. Family, friends, co-workers, brethren. Nobody is beyond the realm of having our views become misaligned with what God's views are. He uses friends and family and those that will try to come with us with good intentions, with advice that's simply just they're trying to help. But we do not need to let them stop us from doing what we know God commands us to do. Now, if that's not scary enough, here's something that's even scarier. With this phrase, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Here we have the difference between man's thinking and God's thinking. And this is what the whole plan of redemption is all about. Getting people to think outside of themselves and to view this from the aspect and the angle, the view of God. And the reason why we do not view clearly, and this is part of the reason why we do not view clearly the cross. Because we want to think of it from human wisdom and not divine revelation. And even possibly viewing the cross from even a denominational description and mindset. It is so easy to have our view warped by what we continuously hear around us. And it ends up coming in subliminally. And it's just there subconsciously. So when we're considering this aspect of what Jesus is illustrating, I'm here to save man's soul. Well, okay, how are you going to do that? I've got to die, I've got to be buried, and I've got to resurrect. What? How is that even going to work? How is that even going to play out? That's not for you to know. But that is the plan. But even with that, everything that Israel has been going through throughout their entire history, what Jesus is saying, is it really anything new? What is it that Israel is doing on a regular basis, a daily basis for their sins?
They're sacrificing.
We're making sacrifices every single day. All right? Then Jesus comes along. He says, I'm going to die. And I'm going to raise again. All of that should have been leading them up to this. A recognition of, okay, these lambs aren't doing it. They're not cutting it. Because if they were, we should be able to do this once. And that's what the Hebrew writer says. But then Jesus comes along as the Son of God in that perfect sacrifice, and He offers Himself once for all. But we're just seeing how quickly the view changes. Just a minute ago, Peter was right on it. Now where's Peter? Way out here in left field. Okay, you just stick with me. You just hold on, and this is going to be seen. So you take into consideration, go to the next one. We have passages like Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. And this is just an illustration to show us how easy it is to lose what's actually supposed to be in sight. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. What's this talking about?
We don't think like God.
Okay, but in what way? Is this just a broad, everything about God is just far above and far beyond?
Spiritually.
Okay. But what about in the context? What's this talking about? This is talking about something very specific. Now, we go to this passage, and our friends go to this passage, and they want to make it vague, and they just want to generalize it about everything. But that's not what it's talking about. Are you there?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead and read it.
Maybe is it 8?
Oh, start in verse 1. Isaiah 55, 1.
Oh, man. Verse 1.
Yeah. And just read down to 8 and 9.
Hold on, I'm in the wrong chapter. Verse 9. Ho! Everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, that hath no money, come ye buy and eat ye. Come buy wine and milk without honey and without price. Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. Incline your ear and come unto me, hear, and your soul shall live. And I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Behold, I have given him for a witness to the people, a leader and a commander to the people. Behold, thou shalt call a nation, that you knowest not, and nations that knew not thee shall run unto thee because of the Lord thy God, and for the Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts, and let him return unto the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.
Okay. So in what way are his ways not our ways, and his thoughts higher than our thoughts?
My notes from verses 6 through 7, and I think this is what you may have described before, is it's an explanation of repentance.
It's a description of redemption. When you are taking into consideration everything that Isaiah has said up to this point, Israel, you are wicked. Israel, you have wounds from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. And they're full of disease. And judgment is coming. And you have all of this scene being described. Now, when you think about all of that, what should be the last thing that's being brought into the mind of God with such a wicked and disgusting people?
That he should want to forgive them.
That he should want to forgive them. But he does. How can that be? His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. When it comes to how man is going to be redeemed, and even that, not only just man in general, but who will be redeemed, he doesn't think the way that we do. This is in the context of salvation, redemption, repentance. But is that how people use that section? How they use these verses? No. We got to be careful with that. Because we will start using these incorrectly and start warping our view. And we'll end up in the very position of Peter. To where we'll start implementing some things and practicing some things that we shouldn't. Verse 24. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Here it is. This is what the cross is all about. What is it that makes Christianity what it is? It's the cross. What do you do with a cross? You crucify. You kill. What is it that we are killing? We're killing self. This is the end to self-will. And that is what the Sermon on the Mount is all about. The model prayer that's used in Matthew chapter 7. How does it start?
Hallowed be the name.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come.
Mm-hmm.
Thy will be done.
All right.
On earth as it is in heaven.
Okay. That last part. Thy will be done. If I am going to pray that, what does that imply?
Be last, God first.
All right. I'm last, God is first. And thus, that's what the cross is doing. That's what Jesus is showing to the entire world and to his apostles. How far is Jesus willing to go to do the will of the Father? To lay down his life. That's the ultimate. So just as we've been discussing about the kingdom, the church, The kingdom has to do with God's will in my life. Seek ye first the kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Matthew 6:33. Only way that I'm going to do that is if I crucify myself. God's will in my life involves everything that we've been studying up to this point. Not one single thing to be left out. And now consider this on the thought of self-denial. Just how difficult it is to appreciate this characteristic in our lives. And when we fail to realize how important this is in our lives, we pay the price. We suffer when we refuse to deny self. This is an article from USA Today, and it's way, way back in the day. A prescription for life stress. And this is being written by a psychologist. Now, what would you think a psychologist would say a person would need to do so as to remove stress from their life?
Have some me time.
All right. Me time, reflect, and especially today, let's throw a bunch of pills at you. But let's read this article together. Could you use a vaccine to ward off the harmful effects of life stress? A heavy dose of involvement with others and concerns for their problems will work wonders, a new study suggests. Research at the University of Idaho and Moscow, there's a Moscow, Idaho, right? That's what I thought. Found that the more self-centered people were, the more anxious, depressed, and hostile to their experience and reaction to stress. The greater the involvement with other people, the fewer the emotional wounds left by job, family, and personal stresses, says James Crandall, chairman of the University of Psychology Department. He studied stress levels, social involvement, and psychological symptoms of 87 men and women, people who were the most supportive, empathetic, and involved with others showed no increases in painful emotional symptoms even when hit with such major life stresses as job changes, divorce, or ill health in their families. Having an active and genuine concern for other people leads to greater feeling of social support and belonging. With that report, he feels strongly this helps to inoculate you against life's stresses. Self-centered people, on the other hand, are less likely to build mutual support networks and may find themselves more isolated when stressful times hit. Involvement with others lends a healthy perspective. Quote directly from Mr. Crandall, "All of us kind of mope along at times with our own petty problems. Then you hear of some real tragedy or worse trouble that somebody had, and if you are egocentric and do not have concern for others, their problems tend to roll over you. But if you really care about other people, this can lift you out of your own narrow rut and improve your outlook." Now, just how backwards that is from today's perspective. And especially with everything that we've just gone through in the last 2 years, where we had to be heavily isolated. You don't think that was done on purpose? You don't think the powers that be know what isolation does to a person? But here's what this article also proves. This article proves, and this was maybe back from the 70s or 80s, this article proves that psychology, psychiatry, science in general, has not learned one new thing that was not first said in the Bible. This whole article is a repetition of what we just read Jesus say. Listen to that verse again. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, what did the article say? Less focus on self, more focus on others. And it actually builds a wall around you for when problems come. Why? Because there's always somebody out there that's got it worse than you. And when you start helping others, it helps you. Lose yourself in care and focus for others. And what will happen from this? Verse 25, For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. Whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. You want to be self-centered? You want to be egocentric and you just want to think about me all the time? You want to be self-centered, you will lose what you are working so hard to get. It's the rich man that's called a fool. I will build bigger barns because I can't contain what I have. And there's where your stress enters. Because I've got more things to take care of. Now, how do we stop this? You read the rest of it. But whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. Being willing to lose everything. And Jesus says that's how you get ahead. That's how you're actually able to gain. Why? Well, what is it that we're trying to gain? We're trying to gain peace. We're trying to gain tranquility. We're trying to be at rest, being able to deal with problems. Then okay, here's the kind of life that you're needing to live. Crucify yourself. Don't think about yourself, think about others. And even as Jesus is preparing himself to go to the cross, who's he still thinking about?
Everyone else.
He's still thinking about everybody else. A man with nothing to lose is a dangerous individual. But we today, we need to bring this really into perspective. We need to start asking ourselves, what are we willing to lose? Just think about all the stuff we have. Would I be willing to walk away from my home? So as to gain Christ? To walk away from the security of a job? To be mindful of the things of the kingdom? To walk away from family, from friends? So that I can be involved in the care and concern for others. There is so much that we have. And remember what was said about the seed that fell among thorns. What was it that choked the word? The care of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becometh unfruitful. Why? Because this is a person that is self-centered, that has not fully understood what the cross is. The cross is going to establish Christianity. The cross is what's going to bring redemption. And Jesus is showing, you want to make your way into that redemption that I'm offering, you're going to have to take up a cross. You're going to have to enter into it the same way that he did. and be willing to kill self. And this is an aspect that is greatly lost when it comes into the teaching of what Christianity is, because so many people are being taught, oh, you can become a Christian without having to give up anything. That's just setting people up for failure. There's plenty that you're going to have to give up. Why is this taking place? Because they're not willing to give it up. Not willing to walk away from it. And that is the cost that we pay. For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? This is the heart of it all. Self-denial is the end of self-will. And the end of self-will means the care for others. And there was a word or a phrase that was used in that article that's key to this. And we even made mention of it in our studies. What about the care and concern for others? How does that need to be? And think about the care and concern for others in the mind of a Pharisee. Do they care for other people? Now, hold on now. Did they care for other people? Okay, what do you mean not really?
Not in the heart.
All right, how do we have that shown to us? All right, number one, prove how they did care for people.
Matthew 6.
Matthew 6. They're giving alms. They're helping the poor. They're benevolent. But is it genuine? Is it sincere? No. They're simply using that as a tool to promote themselves. Oh, we can do good things, but if it's not genuine, then this isn't going to work. And you have people that are like that. They'll do good things and they'll help you out, but it's more out of obligation. Well, I don't really want to, but I will. Or they'll do it just as a facade, a mask, to cover up what's ugly on the inside. But if we are going to do this, it's got to come from the heart. It's got to be genuine. That I am helping others just for the sake of helping others. It's the right thing to do. I'm not thinking, if I'm going to become a Christian, I'm no longer thinking or living in selfish ways. My thoughts are going to be on others. Now, how many of us would have thought the way to get rid of stress would be to give your thoughts, energy, strength, and care to other people? I wouldn't have thought that. In my mind, it would just be, okay, I'm doubling my stress. I've got my stress and now I've got somebody else's stress. But that's not how it works. Now you see, what's crazy about this is that God made us this way. And then we are fighting against the natural inclination of how God created us to be. And this is what Christianity is all about. This is how we relieve stress, and that is not even the primary benefit. The primary benefit in this, the first benefit is, this is fundamental and basic Christianity at its best. And when we think it costs too much to deny self, when we think that the sacrifice costs too much, and then we live self-centered lives, the cost we pay is extra stresses of life. So it's almost, again, paradoxical. you start looking at everything that's required of you, and it's like, well, that price is too high. It's like, no. What it costs if you don't do this is way higher. So it's kind of the other side of what people struggle with is, well, it's too much trouble to discipline. And it's like, no. If you don't discipline, you're just making more trouble for yourself. It's the same thing here. It may seem steep, but if we don't, it costs way more. In our age, we live, we need this lesson more and more. In our day and age where everybody is so busy and they're just focusing in on what they have going on, you can't live that way and be a Christian. So in fact, there's another level of the benefit. What is Christianity designed to do for us? It's designed to slow things down. I don't have to get involved in all of this stuff. I don't have to have myself going 90 different directions because of what I have to do. Why not try to take a step back and let me think about what somebody else is needing. So while evil men and women around us are trying to divide us and to stay away and trying to keep us, away from people, and just look at how stressed people are today because of that. We have the answer for that. We have the answer for that problem. Life is not all about me. That I'm not the center of this universe. That I do not always have to have my will or my way. Christianity puts a stop to that. And we are growing every day that we're able to say, not my will, but thy will be done. And when this is real, and other people become my care and my concern, that's where we get to put our Christianity into practice. And then the stresses of thinking about self are removed. So Christianity will not only save your soul, Christianity will save your life. And just how many people are miserable around us. But then you look at all the stuff that they're into, all the stuff that they're doing. Well, yeah, you're just consuming on yourself. And we start looking at all that and we start thinking, well, yeah, if I can get this or I can do that, then that thing will make me happy. That's not thinking like God. So when we're thinking about what Jesus is really beginning to bring home for the apostles and bring home for the disciples at this stage, it's what every person is needing to be considerate of when they're saying that they want to become a Christian. That you're willing to take on a life that's centered on sacrifice and cares and concerns for others. So we'll stop there, but we'll look at more of Matthew 16 for our sermon. Are there any thoughts, questions, or comments about this great piece of Scripture?
No, but we're glad you taught us some stuff today. Thank you.
It definitely brings everything into view. bring everything into perspective. All right, so if there's no questions or comments, then we'll stop there and we'll get ready for our next